Before manipulation fails, we must understand the game she has always been able to win. A narcissistic woman does not begin with cruelty. She begins with charm. She studies emotional hunger the way a strategist studies a battlefield. She senses insecurity, the need to be chosen, the fear of abandonment. And then, almost instinctively, she positions herself as the solution. This is not always conscious malice. Often it is a pattern formed long ago, a defense structure built around a fragile ego that cannot tolerate insignificance. Her power does not come from strength. It comes from reaction. The silent treatment is not silence. It is a provocation. Gaslighting is not confusion. It is control through distortion. Love bombing is not affection. It is emotional investment designed to create dependency. Each tactic has a single aim: to trigger emotion so intense that the other person loses psychological balance. And here is the critical point. These strategies only succeed when the other person is seeking validation. When a man needs reassurance, fears rejection, or defines his worth through her approval, he becomes predictable. She withdraws, he chases. She criticizes, he defends. She flirts elsewhere, he competes. The cycle repeats because it works. But manipulation is a mirror. It requires a reflection. It requires movement on the other side. Without reaction, it loses form. This is why the stage is so important. For years, she has stood on emotional ground that tilts in her favor. She expects intensity. She expects pursuit. She expects collapse under pressure. And when those expectations are met, her worldview is confirmed. Control equals safety. Yet the real shift begins when she meets someone who does not step into that choreography. Someone who does not panic at distance. Someone who does not beg at withdrawal. Someone who remains internally anchored. Because the game she is used to winning was never about love. It was about leverage, and leverage only exists where there is need. Now, when we speak of emotional mastery, we are not speaking of coldness. We are not speaking of indifference, nor repression. Emotional mastery is not the absence of feeling. It is the governance of it. And this distinction is everything. A narcissistic woman relies on emotional reflex. She presses a psychological button and expects a predictable surge: anger, jealousy, anxiety, pursuit. For most people, this reflex is automatic. An insult triggers defense. Distance triggers fear. Competition triggers insecurity. The reaction happens before awareness has time to intervene. But emotional mastery inserts awareness between stimulus and response. This is the man who feels the provocation and pauses. He notices the tightening in his chest, the impulse to argue, the urge to prove himself, and he does not immediately obey it. In that pause, power shifts, because manipulation requires speed. It depends on you requires speed. It depends on you reacting before you reflect. Self-regulation is not about suppressing emotion. It is about containing it. Detachment is not about withdrawal. It is about refusing to tie your worth to someone else's behavior. Calm under provocation is not weakness. It is strength refined. When she withdraws affection to test him, he does not chase. When she attempts to provoke jealousy, he does not compete. When she criticizes to destabilize him, he evaluates the words without surrendering his center. This unsettles her, not because he is dominant, but because he is not governable. And this is the deeper philosophical truth. A person who has mastered their inner world becomes unpredictable to those who rely on control. They cannot be steered through fear. They cannot be accelerated through insecurity. They cannot be slowed through guilt. Emotional mastery dismantles manipulation quietly. There is no confrontation, no dramatic rebellion, just steadiness. And the one who remains steady in the face of emotional chaos holds the only power that truly matters: sovereignty over himself. And then we arrive at the turning point, the moment manipulation stops working. At first, she does not recognize it. She assumes it is temporary. Perhaps he is distracted. Perhaps he is tired. So she intensifies the test. The silence becomes longer. The tone becomes sharper. The stories designed to provoke jealousy become more deliberate. This escalation is not random. It is diagnostic. She is measuring whether the old levers still move him. But something unusual happens. He does not rise to defend himself. He does not rush to repair what she has intentionally strained. He does not compete for attention that was strategically withdrawn. Instead, he remains composed, not passive, not submissive, simply grounded. This is deeply disorienting for someone accustomed to control, because manipulation depends on emotional predictability. When she pulls away, she expects pursuit. When she criticizes, she expects justification. When she triangulates, she expects rivalry. These are rehearsed dances. And now, suddenly, her partner has stopped dancing. Psychologically, this creates tension within her. If she cannot provoke insecurity, she begins to feel her own. If she cannot trigger fear of loss, she must confront the possibility of being lost herself. The dynamic begins to reverse, not through aggression, but through stability. It is important to understand that this moment is often messy. She may accuse him of being cold. She may claim he has changed. She may attempt one final dramatic gesture to reclaim emotional dominance. But emotional mastery does not react to accusation. It observes it. It does not fight for control. It relinquishes the need for it. And here lies the paradox. When you stop trying to win emotionally, you become unwinnable. Because the person who cannot be destabilized cannot be manipulated. And the moment you refuse to participate in the chaos is the moment the chaos begins to collapse. What becomes fascinating at this stage is the shift in perception. When she realizes she cannot break him, something unexpected begins to emerge. Respect, not the superficial admiration she offers during love bombing, but a quieter, more reluctant recognition of strength. You must understand that, psychologically, a narcissistic personality often equates control with security. If she can move you emotionally, she feels safe. If she can predict you, she feels powerful. But when she encounters someone who does not bend under pressure, who does not fracture under criticism, who does not panic under withdrawal, her internal equation begins to falter. There is a primitive instinct at play here. Human beings at a deep evolutionary level assess stability. We measure whether the person in front of us can withstand stress. Emotional volatility signals fragility. Emotional steadiness signals strength. And strength, even when it cannot be dominated, commands a certain regard. When guilt fails, when provocation fails, when intimidation fails, she is forced to confront a new reality. This is not a man she can control through emotional turbulence. He does not respond to manipulation, not because he is numb, but because he is anchored. His self-worth does not fluctuate with her moods. His identity does not depend on her validation. And here is the paradox: what she cannot control, she begins to evaluate differently. The very resistance that frustrates her also unsettles her previous assumptions about power. Dominance loses its thrill when it has no effect. Drama loses its energy when it turns composure. This does not guarantee transformation. But it does alter the dynamic. The center of gravity shifts. She is no longer the emotional axis around which everything revolves. And that is the deeper lesson. People may test your boundaries, but they ultimately respect the ones you refuse to abandon. Strength is not loud, it is consistent, and consistency, over time, reshapes every relationship it touches. When manipulation can no longer extract emotion, something far more significant begins to happen. The illusion starts to fracture. A narcissistic identity is carefully constructed. It is built on admiration, influence, and the steady flow of emotional supply from others. That supply might come in the form of praise, pursuit, jealousy, even conflict. What matters is not whether the emotion is positive or negative. What matters is that it confirms her impact. It reassures her that she is central, powerful, indispensable. But when she stands before someone who no longer feeds that cycle, the mirror changes. He is no longer reflecting back exaggerated importance. He is no longer amplifying her drama. He is simply steady. And steadiness is confronting because it reveals exaggeration without attacking it, without emotional reaction to reinforce it. The performance begins to feel hollow. The charm, once magnetic, feels rehearsed. The accusations, once destabilizing, lose their force. Even the carefully staged indifference starts to look transparent, not because he exposes her publicly, not because he humiliates her, but because he refuses to emotionally validate the script. Psychologically, this is destabilizing. When admiration fades and control evaporates, the narcissistic defense structure weakens. There may be flashes of anger, attempts to reassert dominance, or even moments of unexpected vulnerability. Beneath the manipulation is often insecurity. The T has long been concealed by control, and here lies a crucial distinction. Emotional mastery does not seek to destroy the other person. It simply withdraws participation in illusion. It stops pretending that manipulation is power. It stops confusing intensity with intimacy. When illusion meets clarity, illusion struggles to survive, and that is the quiet revolution taking place. Not loud, not dramatic, but transformative. Because the moment you stop feeding what is false, you begin strengthening what is real. And so we arrive at the inevitable outcome. When manipulation fails and illusion collapses, the relationship must redefine itself or end. There are only two authentic paths forward. The first is departure. When control is no longer possible, when emotional leverage has evaporated, she may leave. Not always in rage, not always dramatically, sometimes quietly, in search of a dynamic that feels more familiar. Because chaos, however unhealthy, can feel safer than stability when instability has been one's lifelong pattern. The second possibility is adjustment, and this is rarer, but not impossible. When faced with someone who cannot be manipulated, who does not engage in emotional warfare, who maintains boundaries without hostility, a different structure becomes available. The relationship shifts from dominance to negotiation, from testing to transparency, from reaction to responsibility. But here is the crucial insight. The emotionally mastered man does not depend on which outcome occurs. He is not staying to prove himself. He is not leaving to punish her. His decisions are no longer driven by fear of loss or hunger for validation. They are guided by alignment, by whether the connection reflects his values, his stability, his self-respect. And that is the true victory. Emotional mastery is not about conquering another person. It is about refusing to abandon yourself. It is about understanding that love without respect is attachment, and attachment without self-control becomes bondage. When you no longer need to control or be controlled, you step out of the game entirely, and outside the game, manipulation has no language. So the final question is not whether she will change. The real question is whether you are willing to master yourself so completely that no one else's instability can dictate your peace, because the greatest power you will ever possess is the ability to remain centered, even when everything around you is trying to pull you off balance.